Okay, welcome to everybody for our second episode of the 11-part series of industrial hemp in New Zealand. Today we're talking about the government regulations and testing. And before I get started, on behalf of the NZHIA, I'd like to welcome all our viewers to this meeting and those that will be watching it after the event. So it's great to have here with us today Michael Haynes from the Ministry of Health, a manager of the Medicines Control, MedSafe at the Ministry of Health. So that's wonderful that you've been able to join us, Michael. Thank you for that. And we're just waiting for Mary Jane to join us as well, from who's the manager of Forensic Toxicology and Pharmaceuticals at ESR in Wellington. And then we're hoping halfway through the meeting at about 11:30 that the Honourable Damien O'Connor from the Ministry of Primary Industries will be able to join us for our Q&A session. So Michael, we were going to start with Mary Jane, but we'll just wait for her to arrive. So if you would like to take us into your presentation, that will buy me a bit of time. So that would be great. And so I'll hand it over to you and screen share away.
Fantastic. And thanks for the opportunity to come and talk with you, Richard. So this morning, I'm just going to quickly talk through some of the industrial hemp licensing framework. So I'm Michael Haynes. I'm the manager of Medicines Control branch at MedSafe. And MedSafe is part of the Ministry of Health. And MedSafe is the Medicines and Medical Devices Safety Authority. In the time that we've got this morning, quickly going to talk you through some of the licensing framework, specifically relating to industrial hemp. A quick look at the application process that we follow, some topics around testing of industrial hemp crops, and some of the things looking forward. So the misuse of drugs industrial hemp regulations is the pathway that we administer within MedSafe for use of low THC cannabis for industrial purposes. And importantly, this is very separate to the medicinal cannabis scheme. And for those of you interested in the scheme, there's lots of information available on the Ministry of Health website. So if you navigate to the website, type in medicinal cannabis in the search bar, you'll find lots of information about the Medicinal Cannabis Agency and kind of that separate pathway in terms of medicinal products for cannabis. So as I'm sure most of you will be aware, within the industrial hemp licensing framework, there are two different types of licenses. There's a general license, which enables activities relating to approved cultivars, and these activities range from procurement, cultivation, supply, processing into industrial hemp products, and possession of industrial hemp material. Then we also have a research and breeding license, and this is for non-approved cultivars, and also breeding from approved cultivars. And the proviso here is that you have to hold a general license in order to be eligible to hold a research license. So a quick look at volumes of licenses over time. So this provides a roughly 5-year snapshot of how license volumes have changed. And you can see in the orange bars here, the volume of general licenses has increased over time, but really noticeably increased after the changes to the regulations in November 2018. And that's when the changes occurred to allow hemp seed to be used in food. So you can see within a couple of years, we've gone from roughly 50 active licenses that are general licenses up to currently about 240, so a real increase. The number of research licenses has remained relatively constant, and we're looking at just under 20 or so research licenses. And you see, I mentioned approved cultivars. So currently we have 17 approved cultivars. A couple have been approved in the last week. Now, details of these are available on our website. So again, if you head to the Ministry of Health website, type in industrial hemp in the search bar, you will see lots of information relating to the industrial hemp framework. and the approved cultivars are listed on the website. And for those of you who have a research license and are looking to apply for an approved cultivar, there is a dedicated application form available on the website. And it's just important to note that when we grant approval under the regulations for an approved cultivar, just bear in mind that it's solely for the purpose of the regulations, i.e. It doesn't grant any commercial or plant variety rights with it. And the other bit I thought you might be quite interested in is just kind of a bit of a view as to how the licensed cultivation area has really increased over time. And again, this is roughly a 5-year snapshot of the licensed areas. So as at right now, we have licenses or general licenses active for about 4,000 hectares. So again, a really marked increase when the changes to allow hemp seed as food came in. So that's just a really quick overview of the framework. So I thought we'd spend a little bit of time just covering the application process. Just really to give you a flavour for what happens once you've submitted your application to MedSafe. So on receipt of an application, we verify the application, which can include checking that all parts of the form have been completed. But this is also where we start the process for police vetting and also engaging with the local police in terms of information relating to the proposed site for cultivation. Our assessment of the application is against the requirements that are in the regulations, and during the process we may request further information from an applicant as needed. All of our assessments are peer reviewed internally before we make a decision on whether to grant a license, and our decision is then notified to the applicant, and generally this will be approval of the application and the issuing of a license. Where our decision is effectively intending to decline the application and not issue a license, we get in touch with the applicant and we provide an opportunity to provide more information and have a conversation with us. Right. And in terms of our application forms, last year we updated the format of our application forms to make them a little bit easier to use, and these are all available on our website. So here's just a snapshot of the industrial hemp pages on our website that I mentioned, and the application forms are available to download and fill in electronically, and then they can be emailed through to MedSafe. And I thought I'd just cover a few kind of pointers of things that we're seeing with the application forms and areas that as applicants you can help us as the regulator. And so our advice is, particularly if you're applying for a new cultivation site or a new location where you're looking to cultivate industrial hemp, please submit the application in good time, and that just helps us to align with your expectations in terms of when you're proposing to be ready to get up and start cultivating the hemp. Clearly, filling all of these sections of the application form in with as much detail as you can really helps us during our assessment. And an area where we probably request more information than any other area is getting some extra detail about the activities that are intended to be undertaken, which means kind of what the industrial hemp is going to be used for, and details of any hemp products that are intending to be processed and produced. Another couple of bits here are we really encourage you to engage with your local police, because that particularly helps with the assessment of the location. And if you as the applicant don't own the property where the industrial hemp is proposed to be cultivated, we do require some form of evidence that shows that you've got approval or you're entitled to use that property for the activities. And when we've issued a license, we really encourage you to have a quick review of the license when you receive it. And if you've got any questions relating to the activities that you've been authorised for, or the conditions that appear on the license, then please get in touch with us. So the next bit to have a quick look at is just the distinction between what we call a license renewal versus a license extension. So a renewal we effectively view as a complete new application. It results in a new license and there's an application fee payable. Extension is where you effectively apply to extend the expiry date of the current license, and there's no fee payable for that. So when you have a license issued to you, the number in the top right hand side of the license will tell you kind of where through the process it is. So the first part of the number remains constant, and you'll see a 00 or a 01, 02. And that will indicate to you if it's been an amendment to an existing license. And the key things are, we generally issue a license for a period of 1 year, but the license can't be enforced for more than 3 years. So we can extend it perhaps in year 2 and then into year 3. But at the point where we reach 3 years, the renewal pathway for a new application is the route. And when we assess the application for an extension, which is a shortened version of the application form, we're really looking for a declaration that the license holder has been compliant with the conditions on the license, which could include, for example, submitting annual reporting. The next area to very quickly touch on is testing. So it's really just to confirm that for industrial hemp, the reason why we require testing is to provide us with assurance that the cultivar itself is indeed industrial hemp, i.e. the THC content is less than 0.35%. And there are 2 currently approved laboratories for the purposes of the industrial hemp regulations, these being ESR and RJ Hill laboratories. Now, we have had a few adverse test results to date this year. So an adverse test result is where the THC content is above 0.35%. So of the 6 adverse results that I've referred to, 4 related to approved cultivars, 2 related to non-approved cultivars, i.e. under a research license, and 3 of them were greater than 0.5% THC. And I've just given you an indication there of the kind of values, so from about 0.5% through to 2.4% THC. Now, the way that as a regulator we respond to these is case by case. So in accordance with the regulations, we require some extra information from the license holder, and generally we look to track through the supply chain and to see where the seed has come from, to inform our decision as to the action that we may take. In the extreme example that we have here of 2.4%, our response after assessing the information available to us, and we are assured as to the quality of the testing process that's been undertaken, we've issued a notice to require crop destruction. But I think it's important to bear in mind that these 6 adverse results, but compare that to the 240 approximate licenses that we've issued in total. So it's still a very small proportion of what we see. And then just to quickly touch on the testing. So there have been a few recent inquiries about our position where the definition of THC content changed in November 18 with the update to enable hemp seed as food. So it's just to provide you with assurance that MedSafe has consistently applied the same approach before and after the amendment in what we view as total THC. And there's been no change in the way that that has been reported or tested. Just to give you a very quick flavour of where we're heading in the coming months. So we're continuing the rollout of our online application system. So more of you will see information in the coming weeks where you can set up a log on to get a bit more visibility of your applications and licenses and access to all of the regulatory guidance that we've published. We're also working on extra additional guidance material and working to see if we can standardize some of the reporting around annual reports and registers to come into effect for the next year. So that's a really quick flavour of the licensing framework. Thank you for your time. And at any point, if you have any questions, you're very welcome to contact Medicines Control. And all our details are on the website, but our email address is medicinescontrol@health.gov.nz. Thank you, Richard. Back over to you.
Right, lovely, Michael. Thank you very much, Michael. And what I would like to do is apologise to Mary Jane, who was actually here, but as an attendee. So I've just moved her across now. So it was all ready to go. Mary Jane, you were spot on. You were on time. There was nothing wrong there. Thank you very much for getting there and coming to see us. So we'll jump straight into your presentation. But before I do so, it was just exciting to hear what Michael was saying around the number of licenses issued. That's a huge jump. I mean, 241 licenses is massive. And thank you for clarifying the THC testing as well. And I think Mary Jane, that's a nice segue into what Mary Jane will be talking about. And that the new website sounds very interesting, Michael. Lots of new resources for all us hemp people to make our life a bit easier. And we're hoping to work with you as well on that annual return and try and get that standardised, because that information that is not only important to you, but also important for the industry. So to get that in a format that would be really good. So we're working on a bit of an app maybe that can help in that space. So sorry, Mary Jane, just rambling on there a little bit. Over to you, to your presentation on testing from the ESR.
Well, firstly, thank you. Can you all hear me? Can you hear me, Richard?
I can hear you.
Oh, good,
Yep,
good. Thank you very much again for allowing me the opportunity to talk to you all today. As you've said, my focus is in and around the testing space. Less, what you need to do, because you guys probably know a lot of that a lot better than I do, but more why the testing is really important and what the different aspects of testing manage and control in terms of risks and issues for different types of products and commodities. So look, this is a very simplified picture of how the hemp stroke cannabis value chain can be represented across the main areas of industrial hemp and fibre, use of hemp in food or in food products, and as a medicine. And I come from a background of a lot of work in terms of regulatory framework development. And for me, what I see when I look across the kind of value chain for these products is that there's a kind of ever increasing regulatory requirement or regulatory framework that increases as the complexity of the products, or as you move through that value chain. In simple terms, the more complex the processing of the hemp plant or the cannabis plant, the more you move towards use in people, the greater the need for testing and the greater that importance of that testing, not only to show compliance or adherence to regulatory requirements, but the need to demonstrate that compliance meets the concerns around particularly consumer and patient safety when you move to use in people. At times, and depending on where you are within the value chain, this can seem like a really huge burden. And look, I kind of acknowledge that it doesn't come without significant cost, but from my point of view, and what I really wanted to talk to you about today was the fact that the testing needs to be kept in context with the potential risks to people and communities, and then how we build regulatory frameworks, how we build really good value chains that manage those accordingly. But before I move on, I just wanted to give a bit of a nod or an acknowledgement to how much really has changed within the hemp and cannabis sectors in New Zealand over the past 20 odd years. And really just also to acknowledge the role of the NZHIA in this paradigm shift. And to be honest, I just love showing this slide. I mean, one thing I think we need to remember is that around about 100 years ago, there was quite a big knee-jerk reaction from governments around the world around the concerns for the misuse or recreational use of a number of drugs, drugs that included, opium, cocaine, and cannabis. And so based on the back of these concerns, there was an international convention in Geneva in 1921 that decided that non-medicinal use of these drugs would be banned. For me, it's quite interesting that it's about the same time as alcohol prohibition in the United States. And, remembering that the American temperance movements were as anti-drugs as they were anti-alcohol. I think there's a lot of misinformation and scaremongering about hemp and cannabis itself. And, it's quite interesting to note that cannabis prohibition has lasted a great deal longer than alcohol prohibition. But this severely restricted really proper investigation into cannabis as a medicine and has made governments very, very cautious about regulatory management of hemp cultivation, particularly in food. And I think that, over the past 20 years, the development of the regulatory framework in New Zealand has really, been built on the back of good communication between industry and the regulator, and the ability and the ways in which testing has supported this kind of relationship. As we know, one of the big issues with industrial hemp is that you cannot visually tell the difference between high potency or high THC cannabis and low potency, low THC hemp variations. The need to have assurance and control that only low potency or low THC cultivars is grown for fibre and food has driven the regulatory requirements within the industrial hemp regulations, which has ensured a strict licensing regime managed by the Ministry of Health and the developments in which have just been outlined by Michael. And the need within that framework for compliance testing to demonstrate that crops comply with the less than 0.35% THC limits. And as Michael said, at the moment there are 2 approved laboratories, one of which is ESR, and there is a lot of guidance available about how to undertake sampling and the protocols used for guidance for testing. Initially, under the hemp regulations, the use of the seed from the hemp plant was not allowed, although extraction of the hemp seed oil was permissible. We all know that there is no THC inside the seeds and that any presence of THC can only come from contamination with the outer surface of the plant. But thankfully, as of November 2011, the sale of food containing hemp seed is now allowed. The hemp regulations have been updated to specify allowable limits in hemp-based foods, but noting that the only part of the low THC cannabis plant allowed to be sold for food or used as an ingredient in food is the seed. Again, there are strict requirements for growing, supplying and processing or manufacturing or selling foods containing hemp that include requirements to have appropriate licensing, be registered under the Food Act and demonstrate only allowable limits of THC and CBD. It's worth labouring the point here that the focus on the testing undertaken on hemp seed products is to minimise the risk to consumers who take the product and make sure that these foods are safe for people to consume. Most hemp is grown outdoors, and due to the vagaries of the cultivation process and the inherent nature of the plant, there is a very real risk that food products could contain harmful aspects. Hemp and cannabis, they just attract yeast, molds and bacteria, and these must really be controlled for. The same with pesticides that are used on the plants. Hemp and cannabis are fantastic at soil remediation. and as a result can suck heavy metals and other nasties out of the soil. But we really don't want people actually consuming products that contain these kinds of ingredients. And that's where the testing framework is really important, to make sure that they are controlled within the environment that the plants are grown in, within the growth of the plants, and within the products that are made from those. So testing of hemp seed for food use is a really important way of protecting consumers and community health, and ensuring that there is ongoing confidence in the sector and the health benefits associated with these foods. We've been asked, as part of compliance activities that we undertake for Ministry of Health and for a variety of importers and manufacturers who come to us looking to have products tested, you know, the adherence to the limits around THC and CBD in food-based products. And we have tested quite a range over the years of oils, and these are 4 oils locally available in New Zealand. And then you can see that there is quite a variation in the amount of THC and CBD that we see in those. And we have also just recently, well, probably about 6 or 8 months ago, tested a phyto flower that came through to us, an imported product. And in the regulations, the maximum allowed for flour is 5 milligrams per kilogram. And in this case, you can see that there was 3,000 milligrams per kilogram of THC in the product, which is around 600 times the available limit. And the real danger with these kinds of products, not only to consumers that take them unwittingly, knowing that they contain THC and the ongoing issues that might result to that particular person, but it's also a reputational kind of issue in terms of the sector and the way in which people perceive and, you know, understand the safety of products containing hemp seed. As of late December last year, the misuse of drugs, medicinal cannabis regulations were passed, which has established a framework and a regulatory agency for the licensing of medicinal cannabis products in New Zealand. This has been a really big step forward for New Zealand in terms of being able to react to what I see as quite a bottom-up demand for improved and wider access to affordable medicinal cannabis products. It's also looked to establish a domestic cultivation and manufacturing sector here in New Zealand, with the licensing regime and the new agency up and running from the 1st of April 2020. There are strict quality standards that are applied to these products. I think it's really worth noting that in a standard regulatory approach to the approval of new medicines, you would be looking at the clinical efficacy, the clinical safety, and the quality of the products. In this new regime, the requirement to demonstrate efficacy is not there. So the whole basis around ensuring patient safety and ensuring that there is a consistency in the approach taken to the regulation of these medicinal cannabis products is all in controlling the quality. And it's on that basis that the GMP level testing, from the point at which starting material is defined, has been put in place. The quality standard requires a range of different chemical testing, which includes the cannabinoids and cannabinoid levels, other ingredients that may be classified as active ingredients such as terpenes, residual solvents used in the manufacturing process, assessment around heavy metal presence and pesticides, microbiological activity, and a whole load of other pharmaceutical requirements to ensure that there is good consistency in the products and the way they're manufactured and the way that they are provided to patients. The testing requirements need to be rigorous, and some of the evidence that we have around, why that is really important comes from work that we've done with some of the practitioners who are supplying illegal product across New Zealand, some of the so-called green fairies. A very well-intentioned group of people who are making products from cannabis and supplying them to patients who find that prescribed medicines do not work for them, and who find that getting access to approved products too expensive or too difficult to manage. So we've been very interested in what is actually in these products, and over the past year we've carried out a study. The products that we have looked at have included pure extracted cannabis oil, alcohol tinctures, cannabis extracted into hemp seed oil, olive oil, coconut juice, and vape juices. We've tested the samples for cannabinoid content, CBD, and THC, and a range of others. And what we've observed is that there is a very, very wide range of results. The THC content ranged from 0.1% to 87%, and the percentage did not depend a lot on the form of the product. One of the reasons why it's really important to really get the consistency around product and the understanding around the exact content of these products was brought to fore for us with a couple of products that we tested for individuals or children who had been taking these products for uncontrolled epilepsy. One sample was from a concerned grandfather. His daughter procured what was supposed to be a very high CBD product for her 4-year-old son. In fact, when we tested it, it contained high levels of THC and very, very low levels of CBD indeed. And so, from the perspective of patient safety, the understanding of the long-term impact of high THC levels on developing brains is really not well understood and well known. And I don't think there's anybody that would feel that that was a good product to be given to a 4-year-old. The little blue down on the bottom right of the slide is a little blue vial from one of our green fairy patients. They were concerned about the blue layer that had separated out. It contained nicotine, and we don't know what else was in there. Whilst it had cannabinoid content in there, we believe that there was some real safety issues associated with the use of that product. And having a really good regulatory framework for particularly these products is the best way that we can ensure we don't go back to effectively the really true Wild West, where these kinds of products containing not only cannabis but a whole load of other ingredients were circulating. So look, I think I've used up all my time. I hope that what I've been able to do today is provide a bit of context around the testing environment, not only for industrial hemp, but for hemp-based food and medicinal cannabis products, and kind of just reiterate the rationale for using a risk-based approach to being able to have that increasing testing framework alongside the increasing risk and the complexity of the products that you're looking at, and highlight the distinction and necessity for differences in testing at each of those points in that value chain, with the overall understanding that then gives assurance around protecting both patients and consumers using these high-end products, but also the industry and ensuring the growth of the industry to come. Thank you.
That's awesome, Mary Jane. I mean, that was just so interesting, and thank you for sharing such detailed information. That's really a huge benefit for the industry to hear some of that detail that you've been describing, and signalling the potential of issues ahead as well, that quality control it's you know, we need to be in keeping with the world-class regulations. Industry's got to be keeping up, and I do believe that industry, the legal industry is, but you've highlighted quite a concern around the green fairy sort of side of things, and a lot of those products I'm sure would be great, and others, there needs to be some control, you know, there needs to be control over the whole lot for it to really work properly. I'm just going to ask everybody to come back on with their cameras, please. I think it was really interesting also, you know, obviously that slide with regard to the demonisation and the reefer madness, always, as you say, always like to talk to that one. And the imported products is something of note as well, for the same concerns around the green fairies. But thank you for sharing those results on the oils as well, for the THCs and things. And as we agree that that's on the traces on the outside. So they're all within the food code tolerable limits. So, you know, that's why those limits were put into that piece of legislation, to allow that to happen, because otherwise we get into the situation, which we'll get to in a moment, around agricultural compounds, veterinary medicines, where there's no tolerance, so therefore there's no room for allowable products to be entering that market at this stage. I would like to, I'm just going to see if I can ask the Honourable Damien O'Connor to join us as well, if that's possible. Damien, can you hear us? No, we've got a... Aha! Connecting now. Welcome, the Honourable Minister of MPI, Damien O'Connor. Can you hear us okay?
Oh, kia ora, Richard, and sorry, just had trouble getting in. I hope you can hear me and see me.
Yes, we can, and hopefully that'll work for the attendees as well. Thank you for joining us. We've just had two awesome presentations from Michael Haynes at the Ministry of Health around our regulatory framework, and Mary Jane McCarthy from ESR talking about testing, which is some really good background information for the Q&As that we'll have now. There's been one came up, Michael, that we'll just handle quite quickly with regard to a question from Martin. Is there anything worth taking into account when it comes for MedSafe for reaching their decision, or complying with the legal is complying with the legal paperwork enough? But I think you did allude to the fact that it's a case by case, and you know, you're interested in those activities. Any comments on that?
I think the advice we would give is follow the application form. If you have any questions as you go through the form, let us know. The form aligns quite nicely with the requirements of the regulations. So if you follow the form, we should be receiving a lot of the information that we need to make our assessment decision.
That's all right, that's great, thank you. And then another question about the approved cultivars. There is a list on the website, which looks something like that. And there'll be another couple of added shortly, I expect, as well. So there's quite a number of approved cultivars, and of course they're the only ones that can be grown under license. So that handles that question as well. But let's make use of having the Minister's time, because he's obviously a busy unit. Minister, is it just on to get started, is there any updates that you could give us on the consideration of MPI taking on the regulations from the Ministry of Health? Knowing
it's a very good question, and as I say, my belief is that we should be controlling it, but Michael's probably given you an oversight as to, you know, their ongoing oversight. I've had no feedback from growers or prospective growers that the system hasn't worked a lot better this time round, this season, and that was really important. I think you go back a couple of years to a bit of frustration, but I had meetings with the Minister, with officials, to ensure that their oversight wasn't seen as just a last minute thing, that it actually was seen as a core part of responsibility, because we have a legitimate industry here. We do understand the complexities around you know, some of the potential risks, and so health are retaining it at this point. But I guess as we move forward and see it more as a mainstream land use option, then MPI can, you know, perhaps move in and take over. But the issue actually was the process of licensing to ensure that it was efficient and user-friendly. And I think it is a lot more now than it was in the past.
Thank you, Minister. And of course, Michael has told us that there's even improvements on top of that as well, with additional websites and information and guidance. So you're quite right. But again, now that the medicinal scheme, it seems to fit nicely with medicine, and our arable crop seems to go to, nicely fit with MPI. So ultimately, this will be an ongoing conversation, and all of these conversations are ongoing because it does take some lead time. As Mary Jane was saying, you introduce cannabis into the conversation, and it starts to get quite complicated from a regulatory point of view. While we're chatting,
it may get more complex. I think one of the things that we kind of pointed to was the reality of the referendum, and that will change the whole structure of what might or might not occur across the country. And at that point, we need to have a new conversation between the agencies around who's responsible for what. And I don't want to get into that at this point, other than to say that was one of the reasons that we parked that transition in the decision around whether it should go to MPI or not.
Absolutely, makes complete sense, and we'll see post the election and pick up that conversation, because as you say, the referendum does have a bearing on that. So that's a good news thing. Now, the other sort of question out there, we may as well get straight to it, is that because we do have a question in our Q&A regarding ACVM. Has there been any talk amongst the ACVM people about the perceived risk of CBD and THC metabolites showing up in milk and meat products for sensitive export markets?
Yes, and I mean that's been up front, which is why we can't, utilise the waste or the byproducts, I guess, of production. Look, we're very sensitive to that. We got caught out with DCD, which was a nitrate inhibitor. We hadn't had MRLs established, and so that, effectively locked us out of the market until we could resolve that. And I just had an online meeting with the commissioner from the EU. They've just released a farm to fork strategy around food production, and it very much concentrates on animal welfare, but also on residues on the system of production. And so until we get an established MRL that is accepted by our trade partners, very hard to say that we can allow the byproducts to come into the food system, for animal production anyway. So it's complex. We'll keep working on that. But at this point, no, we can't put at risk. And I guess for exporters, it's the flexibility that they have. We may establish an MRL with a market, but what we've seen, particularly through COVID, is that the food producers have had to be able to shift from one market to another on the basis that I guess the certification requirements around production can meet the market requirements of multi-markets, not just one. But anyway, work in progress, and we'll keep an eye on it.
Right, and I think that, as you pointed out, I mean, it's not just from a standard point of view, it's a question that worldwide industry is facing. And I think we can take a nice lead from the WHO, who have said that CBD is not a addictive substance and should be descheduled. And so that may come up again. Hopefully the UN will be revisiting that by the end of this year. I mean, it's been 2 meetings since that WHO announcement, and the UN have deferred for a couple of times. So they'll have to confront that shortly. And that could lead to that pathway. And again, it's about testing, so we know what the numbers are and what is appropriate and not. And there's things that can be put in place, of course, as well, with stand-down periods that people are using for steroids and other things that are fed to the beast as well. It's just a little frustrating from the industry's point of view because agricultural compounds, veterinary medicines covers both production and companion animals, and that's companion animals are seen as a potential market for us as well, and quite a lucrative market. I mean, there's a lot of people with fur babies, and it's a big business in there. So we will be, as an industry, be looking towards forwarding those things, but there is a somewhat of a pathway to get classification and things, and but it's just this sort of zero tolerance that is frustrating. So having a residual level, or even some levels of appropriate dosages that are acceptable, like they have in the food law, eventually maybe that could be something that gets added to the ACVM in time, and with the approval of MOH as well.
Look, we're not opposed to moving that direction, but it's probably not a high priority. And at this point, sorry to say that we'll work in all of these areas, as the market develops. And I guess while there will be, I'm sure, opportunities, particularly in the companion animals area, let's work up the actual products, and we can maybe, when there's a product and you've got an application process which is not necessarily cheap, then we can look at what might be the risks of it then flowing through into other areas of food production that might put us at risk. I personally don't think that utilising it in companion animals in New Zealand offers any risk directly, but nonetheless we have to run a regime that covers all export and domestic markets as well.
Yeah, and agreed, and we look forward to being part of that conversation along with other members of the industry as well. But it does sort of bring us to the bigger elephant in the room, which is the CBD and the treatment of CBD. In the past it's been, without a lot of consultation. I'll have to acknowledge it sort of went into the Misuse of Drug Act quite quickly as a controlled drug, and then it was then moved. And we thought, oh, that's good, it's coming out of there, that should free things up. And then it was moved into a prescription medicine, which now means that the hemp industry is sort of confronted by not only the Misuse of Drugs Act 1975, but also the Medicines Act, which is a bit frustrating. So it's looking at these, with all due respect to the medical companies that have access to these products, and that's great because, they'll be getting into, the patients will be getting in. But it's those non-medical uses that we see as quite a big market for us. And the other concern that we have is the very high quality standards that our New Zealand-based medicinal cannabis companies have to achieve is possibly controlled on some of the imported products that are coming in that are qualified and go through an approval process. But what about the legal products? Is there, I guess this is a question more so for the Ministry of Health side of things, is there things that are happening in that space to protect our patients? Because as Mary Jane was saying, I mean, without those good quality labels and information, these illegal products have an ability to just completely wreck our industry before we even got started. Is there anything that the Ministry of Health, is that on their radar? Do you think, Michael?
Look, it's a really good question. So for a CBD product that's captured by the Medicines Act, it does still form part of the medicinal cannabis scheme. So there is a minimum quality standard that products have to meet. And that's, whilst there's a transition period at the moment, from 1st of October, a CBD product has to meet that minimum quality standard. So that should provide assurance that products are safe and effective. And in addition, a prescriber who's looking to prescribe a particular product for their patients clearly will undertake in their professional capacity and make a clinical decision about the appropriateness of a particular product for treating their particular patients. So hopefully that provides a bit of reassurance that there are control points in place.
Agreed. It does, Michael, for the people that are getting a product that's approved or an unapproved product that's gone through the process, either made in New Zealand or imported, but it's the illegal ones. What's stopping the illegal ones at the border? Is it going to be left to industry to use the Fair Trading Act to try and cease and desist orders and things like that, or is the MOH going to front foot that on behalf of our consumers?
I can leap in there because I do know some information about the fact that customs and the Ministry of Health are really active around scanning and looking for any controlled substances that come across our border. We have ESR's drug chemistry team have a laboratory based out at the border that works with customs and the Ministry of Health around any product that meets that controlled drug status. So there is a lot of activity around CBD and medicinal cannabis products because there are lots of people who are trying to purchase them over the internet, and so there's a lot of work that happens through combined efforts through agencies on this front.
Thank you, Mary Jane, for jumping in there. And just on the conversation of testing, I'd just also like to acknowledge the 4 other members of the NZHIA that are involved in that testing. And they're the Hills Laboratory, which is, as Michael said, an accredited lab along with the ESA now to do the compliance test. But we also have analytical Corthrine and Assure Quality that can do a range not only of the THC and CBD testing, but also the soil testing and food testing for microbiologicals and things, all of which will need standards to come in, because we as individual farmers can do best practice, but best practice for an industry is above that, and we need to really comply with that. And I'm sure everybody in the panel would agree that having really good standards would be a great one to follow, because we're going to be making use of the GMP facilities that the medicines people are creating to make all these other products for export. And Minister, I'd like to suggest that when we create a scenario that means it's $1 billion crop, that hopefully we can use that as leverage to move forward on some of these conversations, because it is one of those ones that we're seeing markets overseas really develop. And by the end of this series, we'll be rolling out Dr. Nick Marsh's report around this particular subject, and that will show the potential for New Zealand, and it's quite exciting. And of course, post-COVID, as of tenant land use and that sort of thing, it's really quite a relevant conversation to be having around employment potential and regional development.
Look, we accept that too, and we're launching next week Fit for a Better World. It's the Primary Sector Council report with a bit of an action plan, and it refers to encouraging alternative land use where people have opportunities. There'll be support systems in place. One of the things we are doing is we've rolled out the water reforms, that is a commitment to better quality water, is setting up an extension system that will help provide the multitude of options that farmers have dependent upon their soil types and their location, so that while they might think dairy is the only thing I can do on this farm, we'll be rolling out what options there are for them. And it might be horticulture, it might be in hemp, it might be in a sheep, high value sheep or meat production. So we're just going to provide that information. Ultimately, the farmers will make the call, but we will have some bottom lines on environmental outputs, which means they will have to look at their farm systems. And so the option of a paddock or two of hemp, or moving into regenerative production, or whatever it is, that will be information that we will provide and allow farmers to, as I say, make the final call.
And that's an exciting opportunity, because as hemp is an annual crop, as you'll be aware, I mean, going over the summer similar to maize, we would be ideal for some of those rotational crops. And again, in that riparian strip, we don't like wet feet, so we wouldn't be the plants along the waterway, but just inside that row, to give that farmer an opportunity to put in something that could soak up nitrogen, for example, would be a useful thing. But again, that comes back to, is the farmer going to want to get a hemp license to plant a little bit of riparian strip? So it's an interesting sort of, the whole picture needs to be taken into account. And I think, we're very fortunate in New Zealand that we're not all sort of fractured by states and other types of things. We've just got one regulator, one set of frameworks. And at the moment, to be fair, the industrial hemp regulations and the medicinal cannabis regulations are all world class. So we just need to see them, achieve what they set out to be. In our case, the hemp regs, it's an enabled industry. And so
I think that's where you need to kind of start working alongside farmers. I mean, I've met a number who are enthusiastic about this, and you just have to work with more of them to understand the potential for this. And our regulatory system may not be perfect, as you say, it's pretty good. So if more farmers are keen to plant the crop, if they see the potential to sell it, and that's the commercial opportunities to sell and make a profit is really important. And that's where you have to work on that. We'll provide the enablers, and that's the regulations and the options through information, but ultimately farmers and landowners will be driven by commercial opportunities.
Yes, and that's something that we'll touch on in next week's episode, covering the growing and some of the market opportunities, because it's very important to manage that scale, because we don't want a boom bust scenario. We want to be able to have those farmers, as you say, have a market for their product. And if they don't, then there's a matter of just waiting until there's infrastructure locally that can add value, and then that'll lead them to that market. Otherwise, it could be that they're growing from a phytoremediation point of view just because they want to clean the soil, in which case a market's not so important. But again, it comes at a cost to put in, so it's got to be a value there. So understanding how that, studying how that fits into the farm systems is an important body of work that we'll be looking to probably take an application to the SFFF You've encouraged us in 2018 to CC you on applications and see them go through. So I hope you're still a supporter of seeing hemp industry applications coming through channels like that.
Absolutely, and it's a very robust independent process that evaluates, you know, what, and it should be leading edge, it should be innovative to get through that process. And so go for it, and I encourage anyone in any sector to do that. It's $40 million a year. Actually, we'll probably be putting more money into that, but we are looking for true innovation.
Yes, and I mean, you know, as Mary James was saying, it's 80 years of prohibition means that everything we do is innovative because it hasn't, you know, in many cases been done before, especially in the New Zealand sense. And then but we do need that local understanding because, you know, you can read a textbook about what happens in the Ukraine, but it's not quite the same as New Zealand. You know?
I agree.
And so that's going to be a fascinating journey. And that's something that's ongoing as well. This is going to be a process that lasts for a very, very long time. The other thing that I just wanted to touch on with Michael was just looking at exports of potentially of biomass and things. That's sort of a case-by-case basis, whereby you would have to make a specific case for a specified purpose. So the door's not completely closed. There's a bit of a pathway, similar with the ACVM. It's just going to be a little bit difficult, but it's something that the industry, again, because we're all looking for that export opportunity, because that's where the really ability to scale and make you know, the returns are. So would that be fair to say, Michael?
Yes, I think that's a good summary. And I think the key there is making sure that the purpose is an industrial purpose. Because if it's an industrial purpose, it's fitting within the industrial kind of framework and pathway. And kind of things to bear in mind would be which part of the plants are being used to make that biomass, because that might influence, you know, which part of the plant, which requirements kick in. And then potentially the need to have a license to export if needed. So yeah, case by case, but we're very happy to have a conversation with license holders who are looking to pursue that route.
Right on, and that's that export license for a controlled drug, and of course the industrial purpose as opposed to a medicinal purpose. Right on. Okay. Well, I think that's taken us up to nearly the end of the hour, so I would like to thank our panellists, the Honourable Damien O'Connor for joining us, Michael Haynes from the Ministry of Health, and Mary Jane McCarthy from ESR. I think that our panellists have really added value to the conversation today, and we really look forward to welcoming you all again in May 2021 at the Physical Summit in Rotorua. So I encourage you to put that in your diary, because that should be a really wonderful opportunity for people to not only get some of their questions answered, but the networking opportunities, which we're all very much hanging out for post these COVID days. And of course, we should acknowledge with the talk of our economic potential that the hemp industry has post-COVID, that there is a lot of people doing it pretty tough, and you know that will probably last for a wee while longer. So our thoughts are with them as they struggle through, and I'm sure if they can reach out to their communities, especially in their rural and regional settings, that there is support for them, and the government's doing a massive effort in that regard as well. But it's all about people power, and these people at the end of the day, their local friends and family will be able to support them, I'm sure. The other thing that I would say about the CBD issue is that although we're stuck with it as a prescription medicine, we do want access to those other non-medical uses, and the industry's not going to be waiting too long for that, but it becomes a political decision. So I'm just sort of sending that up there, running it up the flagpole there, Minister.
We're happy to look at any innovative proposals to government, particularly ones that do generate extra, I guess, economic activity and jobs. You know, we'll leave no stone unturned, and what, you know, we're trying to build a better world beyond COVID, not just the same one. So that's an opportunity for new industries.
That's it, and these conversations post-COVID around what the new normal is really aligned with what our values are as an industry around this regenerative plant that we want to plant. It's great for the soil, and therefore it has great inherent qualities that make it a great product, so therefore it's going to be good for the economy once we get started. I mean, the fibre is a great example of that as far as a scalable industry, and as soon as the government starts mandatory saying that all houses must be made of hempcrete, we'll have a really massive industry on our hands very, very shortly. Lots of decorticators all over the country with crops.
I'm not quite sure we've got that. We've got wool as another fibre, with huge potential, but again, a sector that hasn't quite been able to get its act together. You've got to make sure that your growth in hemp is a coordinated growth, and that you apportion the right amount of resource into the right place, whether it be marketing, whether it be into standards, or just be sharing knowledge of how best to grow it. But it's really important. Sometimes, the effort goes into the wrong place and you end up stalling. So we don't want that. I'd love to see sustainable growth in your sector, realising the opportunities in all the different products that you can produce, but supported by science and good testing. So you've got standards, and to consumers who know what they're getting, not either misled or disappointed or distracted. And so that's really important as well.
Right on, and respect for our customers for sure, and high levels of quality control, because that's the best way to market. I mean, we can't compete as a commodity, so we do have to have that global niche market, high branded, high value, high quality products. And the other flip side of that is, of course, that we're a complement to all these other primary industries, because I think wrapping hemp around wool sounds like a wonderful idea for socks. I'm actually wearing a pair at the moment that really work well with a little possum in it, actually. But the opportunities there are just phenomenal, and also with pine as well. I mean, we still need to hold up the roof of our hemp creek building, so there's a need for the pine and the tree as well as our fibre, and we're just, as you pointed out, another one of these natural fibres.
All right. Well, good luck.
Thank you, Honourable Damien O'Connor, much appreciated. And there was one other question, if I'll just round off on that. It's around herd, cellulose and fibre, all came up in the questions and answers. All of those products are hemp products, so there is no need for a licence. As soon as they become a stem without any leaf on them, they're a hemp product by default. So, and only hemp products, as we're aware, can be made from industrial hemp, which is licensed under the Ministry of Health. So thank you very much, Michael, for issuing those licences. I think it's a phenomenal... the Minister wasn't here when you said it, but the number of licences have gone up from sort of 40 to 240 over the last few years is really a reflection on the scale at which we've taken on board the access to the human food market. So hopefully going from strength to strength and managing that scale and production and supply demand situation. So again, thank you very much to our panellists and to our attendees. We look forward to welcoming you next week. We'll be talking about growing and some of the market opportunities for export products in that space.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Kia ora.